Between heaven and earth, spiritual light burst forth, enveloping the entire great thousand worlds. Under the heavenly scroll, Mu Chen's figure seemed to radiate an indescribable dignity at this moment. Every gesture he made stirred the immense power of the world. Congratulations, Shepherd Lord, for achieving rulerhood. Across the spirit demon continent, countless powerful beings cheered, their voices like thunder, resounding through the heavens and earth. The world had previously fallen into despair because of the 10 eyes of the heavenly evil god. But who could have predicted that the situation would take a dramatic turn? The great thousand worlds had given birth to its first ever ruler, whose complete true name had been engraved on the heavenly scroll. The joy of surviving a catastrophe was so overwhelming that it drove everyone mad. As they shouted the name of the Shepherd Lord, their eyes sparkled with excitement and fervor. Amid the deafening cheers, the heavenly scroll slowly dissipated, and the light surrounding Mu Chen faded completely. At this moment, he appeared just like an ordinary person, with not a single trace of spiritual energy fluctuating within his body. Mu Chen landed before the Flame Emperor and the Martial Ancestor, cupping his fists toward them and saying, "I will take a step ahead. Hope you two esteemed seniors do not mind." The Flame Emperor and Martial Ancestor smiled warmly. At this critical juncture for the great thousand worlds, our primary goal is to stop the heavenly evil god. You've stepped forward, and in truth, it is we who owe you a favor, they said. Mu Chen shook his head. It was the crisis of the great thousand worlds that allowed me to seize many opportunities and take the lead by a step. It should be considered as taking shortcuts. Both seniors have relied on your own accumulated power without the aid of a primordial law body. You are only half a step away from the complete true name, something I have yet to achieve. What Mu Chen said was true. Initially, he had estimated that to reach this point would require nearly 100 years of accumulation and hard training. But no one had anticipated the great thousand worlds would face such a catastrophe, forcing him to push himself, tapping into his hidden potential, and ultimately seizing the opportunity to be the first to ascend. Had there been no calamity in the great thousand worlds, the first to reach the heavenly scroll would undoubtedly have been the Flame Emperor and the Martial Ancestor, not Mu Chen. The Flame Emperor and Martial Ancestor exchanged a glance and smiled kindly. Times create heroes. This has always been the case. When we first stood out, it was also due to the times. In this world, there are few who can grasp the times and rise with the winds. You've done so, and that is a testament to your decisiveness and ability. You need not be overly modest. However, the responsibility of dealing with the heavenly evil god will now fall to you. We will assist from the sidelines, they said. Mu Chen bent and cupped his fists solemnly. I will not disappoint. Afterward, without further words, he raised his head, his gaze sharp as he fixed it on the direction of the heavenly evil god. At this moment, the heavenly evil god's expression had turned extremely dark, and the 10th evil eye glowed with boundless black light. Unexpected, the heavenly evil god's evil eye locked onto Mu Chen. I thought my greatest opponents this time would be the Flame Emperor and Martial Ancestor, but I never expected you would be the one to reach the top. In the great thousand worlds, with billions of lives unwilling to be slaves, someone would rise. Whether it is me or someone else, this person would eventually appear, Mu Chen replied calmly. The heavenly evil god gritted his teeth, his voice laced with anger and hatred. Your great thousand worlds really do have some luck. To think you could turn things around like this. His voice was filled with rage, for when his 10 eyes had appeared, victory had seemed certain. But no one had expected that Mu Chen would also complete his true name at that moment. The heavenly evil god knew very well that once a complete true name was left on the heavenly scroll, it meant that Mu Chen could tap into the world's great power. The great thousand worlds would become his home field, blessed with boundless support. Today's battle would undoubtedly be a fierce one. The heavenly evil god's face darkened, and with a deep breath, his 10th evil eye suddenly shot out dark beams, gathering in his palm. Slowly, a black spear, about several yards long, formed in his hand. 10 Eyes Ghost Demon Spear. The spear was pitch black, and on its surface, 10 eerie evil eyes slowly blinked, releasing an indescribable aura of evil. A terrifying wave of power radiated from it, causing the entire lower dimension to tremble. Clang! The heavenly evil god stomped heavily on the ground, and immediately the void shattered. Gigantic cracks spread out like a spider's web. He glared fiercely at Mu Chen and coldly said, "Today, I'll see what you, the one with the complete true name, can do to me." Mu Chen stared at the demon spear in the hands of the heavenly evil god, his eyes narrowing slightly. It was clear that the latter had stopped holding back, even revealing the demon spear that had never appeared before. Weapons, huh? Mu Chen pondered for a moment. With a sudden flick of his sleeve, boundless spiritual energy gathered from all around and ignited, transforming into a blazing sea of spiritual flames. He then flicked his finger, sending a black beam of light into the sea of flames. The black light was, in fact, a massive black pillar, the great Xun'er demon pillar, one of the weapons Mu Chen had used long ago. However, as his strength grew, Mu Chen had used it less and less. But now, at his current level, he was capable of forging a weapon surpassing a peerless sacred artifact by hand. Given this, he decided to use the great Xun'er demon pillar as the base material. Flames roared. The blazing sea of spiritual fire burned fiercely, and its intense heat quickly melted the great Xun'er demon pillar, turning it into a pitch-black liquid that flowed within the flames. It still needs some auxiliary materials. Mu Chen observed the flowing black liquid and flicked his finger again. A ringing sound of a sword echoed through the air as the heavenly emperor's sword, which had been damaged and had almost depleted its power, was thrown into the spiritual fire. Though the heavenly emperor's sword was broken, its materials were still valuable enough to forge a new weapon capable of becoming the strongest in the great thousand worlds. The heavenly emperor's sword quickly melted into a crystalline liquid, and under Mu Chen's control, it merged with the black liquid. Soon, the mixture began to take shape, and Mu Chen continued to infuse it with the boundless spiritual energy from the heavens and earth. At the same time, his mind moved, and the world force descended, falling into the mix. Boom! In just a few breaths, a thunderous sound echoed from the sea of flames. Everyone witnessed a dark beam of light shoot out and hover in front of Mu Chen. As the light faded, what emerged was a new weapon. It resembled the great Xun'er demon pillar, but lacked the menacing aura. Instead, it had become more solid, immense, and powerful, like a pillar supporting the heavens, unshakable. From now on, you shall be known as the great Xun'er sacred pillar, Mu Chen declared. At his words, the pillar erupted in radiant light, almost as if celebrating, revealing a strong sense of spirit. With a wave of his hand, the great Xun'er sacred pillar quickly shrank down, transforming into a giant rod that landed in Mu Chen's palm. With a slight shake, the space shattered, and he pointed it toward the heavenly evil god. Humph! The heavenly evil god snorted coldly, stepping forward and appearing in front of Mu Chen with the demon spear in hand. He swung the spear, summoning waves of dark magic. Each wave of magic was strong enough to destroy an entire continent. Mu Chen, unfazed, gripped the great Xun'er sacred pillar and met the attack head-on. The pillar, infused with world force, radiated immense power. Clang! The demon spear and the sacred pillar collided with tremendous force, unleashing ripples of power that stretched for millions of miles, causing massive destruction. The Flame Emperor and the martial ancestor retreated, joining forces to channel spiritual energy into the lower dimension. They created a powerful protective membrane, covering the lower dimension to prevent the destructive clash between Mu Chen and the heavenly evil god from spreading to the great thousand worlds. Clang! Clang! Countless pairs of eyes watched in awe as the battle unfolded in the lower dimension. The two figures clashed violently, with the demon spear and the sacred pillar colliding repeatedly, each strike generating devastating shockwaves. Despite the interference from the Flame Emperor and the martial ancestor, the shockwaves still reverberated, sending waves of fear through countless powerful beings. Roar! Roar! The battle continued to tear apart the very fabric of the world. The heavenly evil god, frustrated by his attacks being thwarted, let out a low growl. His face twisted in a savage expression as black liquid poured over his body, eventually forming a terrifying demonic armor. At that moment, He resembled the god of destruction itself. Clang, clang. In the span of a single incense stick, the two had fought over 10,000 rounds, as if the heavens and earth had lost their colors, and the sun and moon were dimmed by the overwhelming power. The living beings in the world could only watch in terror. However, the only reassurance for the countless souls in the great thousand worlds was that, despite the heavenly evil god's vicious attacks, Chen still showed no signs of retreat. With the power of the world behind him, Chen's strength was clearly on par with the Tenai heavenly evil god. Boom! The demon spear and the sacred pillar collided once again, creating a massive destructive shockwave. Both Chen and the heavenly evil god were sent flying, and the space beneath them shattered. Heavenly evil god, this great thousand world is my domain. If we continue to stalemate, it will only bring you harm. Chen stomped down heavily with the sacred pillar in his hand, his eyes cold and sharp as he stared at the heavenly evil god. Damn it! Damn it! You truly deserve to die. The face of the heavenly evil god twisted in fury, and his evil eye flickered madly, radiating a vicious light as it fixed on Chen. It was clear that he understood the stalemate was extremely unfavorable for him. If you want to die sooner, then I'll fulfill your wish. Tenai demon statue, devour the cosmos. The heavenly evil god roared in a low voice, and in the next instant, boundless demonic light surged from his body, gathering behind him and gradually transforming into an endless demon god apparition. The demon god seemed to connect heaven and earth, and on its enormous body, 10 evil eyes blinked. Each evil eye radiated a terrifying evil aura. Seeing this demon god apparition, both the Flame Emperor and Martial Ancestor's expressions turned slightly grim. It seemed the heavenly evil god was about to go berserk. Boom! The Tenai demon statue's evil eyes locked onto Chen, and instantly, a boundless demonic light shot out, appearing before Chen in an instant. Boom! The sacred pillar in Chen's hand surged to an immense size, transforming into a gigantic pillar like one that could support the heavens, slamming down hard at the demonic light. Boom! The sacred pillar crashed heavily into the demonic light, but was repelled by a terrifying force. Chen himself was struck, and he flew backward, tumbling for tens of thousands of miles. Die! The heavenly evil god roared. The evil eyes of the Tenai demon statue flickered continuously, and waves of destructive demonic light poured out in torrents, as though they would not stop until Chen was obliterated. This is bad. The Flame Emperor and Martial Ancestor's expressions changed slightly as they saw the fierce onslaught from the heavenly evil god. Just as they were about to intervene, an ancient light and shadow swept across from afar. It resembled a mysterious light mirror, and no matter how many demonic lights shot toward it, they were devoured by the mirror. After a moment, the demonic light ceased. The heavenly evil god glared at the distance, and there, Chen hovered in midair. Behind him, within the ancient spiritual light, a figure stood. This figure looked exactly like Chen, except that there was a radiant halo behind his head, a five-colored halo emitting extremely ancient fluctuations. If one were to carefully sense it, they would realize that the aura radiating from it was that of the eternal undying body, boundless radiance body, Tai Ling's sacred body, ancient night god body, and primordial god body, primordial world body. Chen stood in the void, his deep voice resonating. Previously, the four avatars had merged into one, forming a new supreme Dharmakaya. This new supreme Dharmakaya combined the strengths of the five primordial law bodies, embodying the most profound mysteries and boundless power. Take one of my moves and see. Chen glared fiercely at the heavenly evil god, his hands quickly forming seals. The five-colored halo behind his head suddenly shot out, descending from the heavens to appear above the Tenai demon statue. Five Ancestors Demon Ring. Buzz. The five-colored halo glowed with brilliant light, and faintly, five ancient primordial law bodies seemed to manifest, with spiritual light descending like fire, pouring down upon the Tenai demon statue. Roar. The Tenai demon statue roared loudly as it was drenched in the ancient spiritual light. Its massive body dimmed, as though it was being melted. Demon Devour. Sensing the changes around him, The heavenly evil god didn't dare delay. With a low growl, the 10-eyed demon statue sucked in a deep breath. Boundless demonic energy gathered in its enormous mouth, compressing. Demon spew. Boom. In the next moment, it was as if a sea of the darkest demonic energy surged forth, sweeping across with devastating force, continuously impacting the five-colored halo and repelling the fiery spiritual light that fell from above. In the great thousand world, countless pairs of eyes were glued to the spirit mirror. It was clear to everyone that the battle between the two had reached a boiling point, with all sorts of deadly moves constantly being unleashed. The slightest misstep or opening could lead to devastating consequences. The heavenly evil god is getting anxious. The Flame Emperor and Martial Ancestor watched this scene and could tell that as time passed, Mu Chen's advantage was becoming more and more apparent. After all, this was the Great Thousand Worlds, and as the home ground, Mu Chen could tap into the world force to continuously confront the heavenly evil god. As for this situation, the heavenly evil god had clearly anticipated it, which was why his expression grew more and more grim. Standing beneath the 10 eyes demon statue, the 10th eye on his forehead flickered wildly. After a long moment, a ferocious look suddenly crossed his face. Since you insist on pushing me, then don't blame me. He knew that if he did not break the deadlock, he would surely be defeated. Boom. The 10 eyes demon statue, engulfing the heavenly evil god, suddenly transformed into a burst of demonic light and shot up into the sky. The 10 eyes flashed, tearing apart the void, and they appeared in the emptiness outside the spirit demon continent. The 10 eyes demon statue let out a deafening roar as its demonic cry echoed across the great thousand worlds. Millions of demons into Avicii, the demon prison descends. Boom, boom, boom. The moment the roar faded, countless demonic shadows in the extraterritorial evil army screamed in agony and then exploded into blood mist, rising into the sky. The 10 eyes demon statue opened its massive mouth and swallowed the torrential blood mist, then formed a hand seal. Its enormous body exploded, and immediately, a massive surge of demonic current poured down from above. These demonic currents tore through the void, splitting into millions of streams, appearing in every corner of the great thousand worlds. At this moment, countless terrified eyes from the continents across the great thousand worlds saw the destructive demonic current tearing through the void, like a massive tsunami about to obliterate the continents. On the spirit demon continent, countless powerful beings were horrified. Haha, since you want to protect this great thousand world, I'll just destroy it all. The millions of demonic currents shattered space and flowed into the great thousand worlds, as the heavenly evil god's sinister voice rang out. Mu Chen, the Flame Emperor, and Martial Ancestors figures also appeared above the spirit demon continent. They gazed at the boundless demonic currents, and their expressions changed. This guy is truly insane. He self-destructed the 10 eyes demon statue, which also heavily damaged himself, said the Flame Emperor with a solemn face. We must stop him. If not, the great thousand worlds will suffer catastrophic losses, said the Martial Ancestor gravely. But these Avicii demon streams are splitting into millions, surging towards the great thousand worlds. Stopping them will be incredibly difficult. The Flame Emperor furrowed his brow. At this moment, all the continents in the great thousand worlds were thrown into chaos. Countless creatures trembled as they looked at the incoming demonic currents. If these currents poured down, the entire world would be turned into a hell. Mu Chen's eyes flickered with spiritual light, reflecting the chaos of the great thousand worlds. His voice was low and solemn. That demonic current can devour vitality and grow stronger with every life it consumes. The heavenly evil god is hiding within it, devouring countless lives and trying to grow even more powerful. The Flame Emperor and Martial Ancestors' pupils contracted slightly. Then we can't let him succeed. Do you have a way to stop it? Mu Chen sat cross-legged in the void, nodding slightly to the Flame Emperor and Martial Ancestor. He said softly, "Please don't worry, Senior. If I let this villain succeed, I would have betrayed the opportunity that the great thousand worlds has given me. He wants to divide into millions and devour the creatures of the great thousand worlds. If that's the case, Then I'll show him that when billions of lives unite, they too possess extraordinary power. On the North Song continent. Currently, the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy was in turmoil. All the students stared in horror at the massive demonic current that seemed to have fallen from the sky, their faces pale with deep fear. Facing such power, even beings like the North Abyss Dragon Kuan, who were heavenly supreme, felt a profound sense of dread and helplessness. He exchanged glances with the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy and bitterly said, "I never expected that after narrowly escaping one calamity, our academy is now shrouded in another disaster." The Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy sighed. "This is a calamity for the entire Great Thousand Worlds. It's hard to imagine the devastation if the heavenly evil god succeeds." Tang Xun'er, Li Xiantong, Wen Qingxian, and the others, upon hearing this, all wore grim expressions. At this moment, facing such a disaster, we have no way to avoid it. But even if it's like an ant trying to stop a cart, we must let the extraterritorial evil clans know that our Great Thousand World is not without blood. Shun Songxing gripped his palm tightly, and a golden spear appeared in his hand. His shout suddenly rang out, filled with determination. At Shun Songxing's shout, the countless panicked and terrified students in the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy seemed to find a shred of comfort and a rallying point. Immediately after, they all roared in unison. "We will strike together. Even if it costs us our lives, we must stop it for even a moment. With death looming, why not fight with all their might?" It was better than sitting idly by, waiting for destruction. The North Abyss Dragon Kuan, observing this scene, couldn't help but laugh heartily. He said, "Good. The youth still have the blood of the passionate. We old ones have dragged you down. Since it's come to this, let's put our old bones on the line and guard our Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy together." Within their bodies, two powerful streams of spiritual energy erupted first, charging directly toward the rolling demonic current. Boom, boom. Amidst the roar of the skies, spiritual lights exploded within the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, following the North Abyss Dragon Kuan and the Grand Song Academy headmaster, transforming into a vast sea of spiritual energy, charging towards the demonic current that threatened to destroy the continent. And behind the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, other regions of the North Song continent also erupted with countless streams of spiritual energy rainbows, clearly from those who, in desperation, refused to wait for death and had started to fight back. Tianluo continent. Everyone, strike together and protect Mu Manor. The cold voices of Mandala and Nine Nether reverberated throughout the Mu Manor. Instantly, countless shouts of determination filled the air. As soon as their words fell, they struck first. Immense streams of spiritual energy shot upwards. Swoosh, swoosh. Right after, millions of spiritual lights surged forward, their momentum overwhelming, heading straight for the world-annihilating demonic current. At the same time, on other continents across the Great Thousand Worlds, under the shadow of the death crisis, all people cast aside their fear and began to unite for one last stand. At this moment, all across the Great Thousand Worlds, spiritual energy torrents erupted on every continent, all battling against the demonic current. Haha, like a mantis trying to stop a chariot, seeking death. In response to this resistance, from within the demonic currents, faint sounds of the heavenly evil gods mocking demonic laughter echoed. In the next instant, the spiritual energy torrents collided with the demonic current. However, at the moment of impact, every living being's heart suddenly turned cold, for they saw that as the demonic current passed, the countless spiritual energy torrents were instantly wiped out as though they had fallen into the ocean, unable to stop even a single moment of the demonic flow. The gap is this vast. Shun Songxing, watching this scene from the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, couldn't help but feel his eyes welling up with sorrow. The entire academy fell silent, as the courage of all the students had been entirely drained. You thought you could stop me just by having numbers? What a foolish fantasy. From within the demonic current, the mocking laughter of the heavenly evil god continued. His expression seemed to imply that he wanted to pour all the frustrations he had suffered at Mu Chen's hands onto the creatures of the Great Thousand Worlds. The entire continent was silent, and everyone was immersed in overwhelming despair. Oh, I thought, when people unite, even ants can shine brightly when gathered together. Just as everyone was about to lose all hope, a clear and bright laugh suddenly rang out through the heavens and the earth. Swish! All eyes quickly lifted, and they were overjoyed to see, high in the sky, spiritual light coalescing into a figure. It was none other than Chen, Senior Chen. Within the Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, countless students erupted in deafening cheers. Of course, it wasn't just on the North Song continent. On other continents across the Great Thousand Worlds, where the demonic current had spread, Chen's figure appeared, and the same cheer echoed in unison. Lord of the Manor. On Tianluo continent, countless strong figures from Mu Manor gazed at that silhouette, also erupting into cheers. In that instant, their morale surged. All living beings of the Great Thousand Worlds, listen to my command. Strike once again and show this heavenly evil god the power of the creatures of the Great Thousand Worlds. Chen's voice echoed in everyone's ears. Countless people looked at each other, as they had already tried to fight, but the result had been despairing. However, Chen's prestige had now reached its peak, so his appearance dispelled the fear and helplessness of countless beings. In the next moment, a few scattered streams of spiritual energy began to rise. Boom, boom. And following those sparse streams of spiritual energy, the world suddenly trembled. Millions of spiritual energy torrents suddenly surged upward, vast and mighty. Every continent, every person, fuels their spiritual energy, regardless of strength or weakness, soaring into the sky. Standing above the continent, Chen smiled slightly. He then formed a hand seal, and countless torrents of spiritual energy gathered toward him, eventually flowing through his body. Boom. However, as the torrents of spiritual energy passed through his body, they unexpectedly transformed into a different kind of power. It was none other than battle will. Heavenly evil god, today I'll show you the power of the will of billions of lives across the Great Thousand Worlds. Chen's voice echoed across the heavens. Immediately, boundless torrents of battle will surged into the sky, transforming into an endless battle-intent dragon, roaring as it charged toward the demon flow. At this moment, the same scene was unfolding across the continents of the Great Thousand Worlds. Boom. Under the intense gaze of countless onlookers, the torrents of battle will and the demon flow clashed once more. The entire world seemed to tremble violently at that moment. This time, however, the demon flow did not achieve its usual overwhelming effect. Instead, under the vast impact of the battle will, it could no longer descend, even slightly. On the other hand, the battle will torrents grew even more resilient, advancing step by step, while the demon flow began to collapse, devoured and consumed by the battle will torrents. Chen, you must die. The furious roar of the heavenly evil god echoed from the depths of the demon flow. Unfortunately, the one who dies today will only be you. Chen's eyes turned cold. He took a deep breath and dashed forward, transforming into a streak of spiritual light as he plunged into the vast torrents of battle will. Boom. With Chen's arrival, the torrents of battle will surged violently. The battle-intent dragon roared, its mouth blasting out the battle-intent dragon breath, shattering the surging demon flow. Lord Shepherd. Lord Shepherd. This scene instantly triggered earth-shattering cheers across the continents. In the void of the spirit demon continent, both the Flame Emperor and the martial ancestor gazed at the scene with a hint of admiration in their eyes, saying, "To use living beings as soldiers, this is the method of a battle formation master." They had almost forgotten that Chen had once been a battle formation master. However, ordinary battle formation masters could only command limited armies. Yet, now Chen was using the lives of the entire Great Thousand Worlds as his soldiers. The power was beyond imagination. As cheers erupted throughout the Great Thousand Worlds, the extraterritorial evil clan was thrown into turmoil, panic spreading across their faces. Countless demon flows shattered across the Great Thousand Worlds, and faintly, the furious and unwilling voice of the heavenly evil god could be heard. Extraterritorial evil clan, retreat. With the voice of the heavenly evil god, chaos erupted among the extraterritorial evil clan. Space rifts were torn open, and everyone was desperately fleeing to the lower dimensions. All forces in the Great Thousand Worlds, listen up. Pursue with all your might and expel these extraterritorial evil clan members from our world. The Flame Emperor and Martial Ancestor ordered sharply. Yes. Countless powerful beings on the Spirit Demon continent roared in response, and in the next moment, countless streaks of light shot out like a storm. It was clear to everyone that the tide of this world-destroying catastrophe was now turning in favor of the Great Thousand Worlds. The Flame Emperor and Martial Ancestor turned to look at Mu Chen, who was seated before them. At this moment, Mu Chen opened his eyes. The heavenly evil god's aura has completely disappeared. He must be trying to escape, Mu Chen said. The Flame Emperor and Martial Ancestor's expression stiffened. We cannot let him escape, or it will bring great future calamities. The heavenly evil god was far too dangerous, with immense power. If left unchecked, his escape would lay the seeds of disaster for the Great Thousand Worlds. Mu Chen nodded. He has stirred up chaos in the Great Thousand Worlds for millennia. How can we let him leave peacefully? With a solemn expression, Mu Chen extended his hand, causing the surrounding space to shatter. Countless torrents of battle will howl toward him, eventually converging at his fingertip to form a glowing orb, about the size of a dragon's eye. Within the orb, it was as if an entire world resided, but it was filled with the battle will of billions of lives across the Great Thousand Worlds. Go! Mu Chen flicked his finger, and the orb shattered the void, turning into a stream of light that whizzed away. The space was infinitely compressed, and the heavens and earth here became chaotic. In the void, violent winds raged, and even Saint-grade experts would not dare to tread lightly in this domain. In the midst of chaos, the space trembled. A black light streaked out, transforming into a shadowy figure. It was the heavenly evil god. His face was clouded, eyes sharp with malice as he gazed into the chaotic void. He knew he was at the edge of the Great Thousand Worlds. Beyond this lay the world membrane. Tens of thousands of years prior, he had led the extraterritorial evil clan through this very place into the Great Thousand Worlds. However, he never anticipated that tens of thousands of years later, he would be forced to leave once again from here. Damn it, Mu Chen, Flame Emperor, Martial Ancestor. I, the heavenly evil god, will not concede easily. I will return, the heavenly evil god coldly declared. Boom. The moment his voice faded, the space before him shattered, and a beam of light surged forth. This beam was seemingly unremarkable, but it caused the heavenly evil god's expression to change dramatically. He sensed a wave of destructive energy surging toward him. With a roar, the heavenly evil god conjured swirling demonic light, instantly forming layers of defenses in front of him. Bang! Bang! Yet, the beam swept past, effortlessly shattering all his defenses. In the blink of an eye, the light materialized in front of the heavenly evil god, revealing itself as a brilliant, radiant orb. Through its shimmering surface, he caught a glimpse of his own astonished face. Before he could react, the eerie orb charged at him, striking hard against the center of his brow where the evil eye resided. Puff! The orb collided without any cataclysmic impact, yet dark blood sprayed forth as it shattered the evil eye and embedded itself deeply within. The heavenly evil god froze, his face etched with disbelief. He trembled, reaching up to touch his brow where the evil eye had broken. Meanwhile, the orb began to crack, unleashing a torrent of battle will, bolstered by the fury of countless beings from the Great Thousand Worlds, which surged into his body. How is this possible? The heavenly evil god muttered to himself. In front of him, space rippled as a figure stepped forth. It was Mu Chen, who glared coldly at the heavenly evil god and said, "Though all beings are insignificant, they still have the power to extinguish you." The heavenly evil god's complexion shifted as black blood flowed from the gaping wound in his brow, making him appear particularly sinister. He felt the destructive power within him raging and let out a deep sigh, murmuring, "I never expected that I, the heavenly evil god, would fall within this Great Thousand Worlds." He lifted his gaze, and though he was blind, he still looked at Mu Chen. Your great thousand worlds possesses extraordinary fortune. Soon, with you, it will have 3 guardians. Quite impressive. This great thousand worlds is extraordinary indeed, Mu Chen said flatly, locking eyes with the heavenly evil god. You have terrorized my great thousand worlds for tens of thousands of years, sparking 2 major calamities that caused suffering to its beings. Today, you must pay the price. The heavenly evil god smirked indifferently. A mere ant of a being. Why should I care if you kill me? It's only right I meet my end at your hands today, but to think I would feel remorse? That underestimates me, the heavenly evil god. He paused, a hint of regret flickering at the corner of his mouth as he whispered, I had intended to conquer this great thousand worlds, to bolster my extraterritorial evil clan. Alas, a wish that has turned to emptiness. As his words fell, cracks suddenly appeared on the surface of his body, rapidly spreading and enveloping him. Boom. In the next moment, the heavenly evil god's body exploded, unleashing a tide of demonic energy. Mu Chen watched as the dark maelstrom swirled around him. With a thought, a stream of spiritual light erupted from his crown, forming an ancient tower that descended from the heavens to absorb the demonic energy. Boom. The black tower landed on a desolate continent within the chaos, its spiritual light flickering to seal off the area from detection. The demonic energy contained within the pagoda was the essence of the heavenly evil god's life's work. Allowing it to spread would taint the spiritual power of heaven and earth, hence it had to be suppressed and purified. However, this time, the heavenly evil god was irreversibly defeated. Mu Chen stared at the pagoda for a long time. Finally, he waved his robe, channeling spiritual light to project the scene across the various corners of the great thousand worlds, his voice resounding powerfully. The heavenly evil god has been vanquished. The calamity in our great thousand worlds has come to an end. From this day forth, those who offend our great thousand worlds shall be punished. Boom. In the great thousand worlds, a deafening cheer erupted from every continent. Countless people knelt in submission, feeling like ants beneath the world-destroying might. They could only endure with their bodies. Fortunately, the great thousand worlds were not doomed, and at that critical moment, a peerless genius stepped forward to eradicate the demon calamity. Shepherd Lord, Shepherd Lord, Shepherd Lord. Across the world, countless voices rang out in cheer, shaking the very fabric of the world. At Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, innumerable students raised their arms and shouted, their voices hoarse but unable to contain their enthusiasm. They looked at the imposing figure reflected in the void, their eyes filled with fanaticism. This guy? I wonder if in this lifetime, I can ever reach his level. Shen Songxing looked up, sighing. As long as we don't give up, there's always hope. Just keep striving. Li Xiantong smiled slightly and said. The two exchanged a glance, both smiling. They still remembered the time back in Northern Heaven Spiritual Academy, when even though they were stronger than Mu Chen, that young man had never feared them. He had relentlessly pursued them and eventually surpassed them, leaving them far behind. Mu Manor, my son is really something. Mu Feng stood before the grand hall, smiling at the scene before him. He turned to his old friends from Northern Spirit Realm, like Tang Shan, and said, he had brought them to Mu Manor for safety, as the great thousand worlds had been in turmoil. Tang Shan and the others shook their heads helplessly as they watched his smug expression. Your son is now the greatest in the great thousand worlds, and you're still here bragging about it? On the spirit demon continent. Luo Li placed her jade hand behind her, slightly raising her delicate face as she gazed into the void. The space before her rippled, and Mu Chen's figure emerged. Ah, the great hero returns. Luo Li teased with a soft laugh. Mu Chen smiled, taking a few steps forward. He extended his arm and wrapped it around the girl's slender waist, gently speaking. I was really afraid before, afraid I wouldn't be able to protect you. Luo Li smiled softly and reached her arm around Mu Chen's waist, whispering, Mu Chen, you really did well. I'm proud of you. And now, you are truly a peerless powerhouse. Back then, you kept your promise. Mu Chen looked down at her flawless face, grinning. So, when do we get married? Luo Li's face flushed slightly, but there was a trace of anticipation in her clear eyes. Anytime. Mu Chen gazed at the face before him, so unforgettable, and for a moment, he seemed to see the cold and determined girl he had first met on the spirit road. Luo Li. Yes, having you by my side in this life is truly wonderful. I feel the same way. The calamity passed, and the great thousand worlds returned to peace. After the heavenly evil god was struck down, the extraterritorial evil clans fled in disarray. Although many were killed by the great thousand worlds forces, it was clear that the extraterritorial evil clans still had some capable individuals. Eventually, they managed to escape the great thousand worlds through some lower dimensions. However, these were now like lost dogs, and without the heavenly evil god, they were unlikely to pose any real threat. After driving out the extraterritorial evil clans, Mu Chen harnessed the power of the world force to purify the lands once occupied by the evil clans, eradicating all the demonic aura. Once more, spiritual energy, which had been absent for thousands of years, began to flow throughout this half of the great thousand worlds. Such vast and endless lands were now opened up, inevitably sparking numerous disputes over resources and territories. Various superpowers began competing for dominance. However, Mu Chen no longer intervened in these competitions. He knew that struggles would never cease, as it was the law of the world. If the great thousand worlds had no competition at all, it would surely descend into decay. After a year of recovery, the devastation caused by the demon calamity slowly faded, and the entire great thousand worlds began to radiate with even greater vitality. At this moment, a wedding like no other began, under the watchful eyes of countless beings from all over the great thousand worlds, in Mu Manor on Tianluo continent. First bow to heaven and earth. Second bow to our ancestors. In the grand and joyous main hall of Mu Manor, red lanterns flickered with light, and sounds of celebration echoed far and wide. Inside the hall, on the high seats, elders from both sides, Qing Yanjing, Mu Feng, Luo Heavenly God, and others, sat in attendance, their faces beaming with smiles as they watched the two young figures kneeling before them. On either side, Emperor Yan, martial ancestor, and their wives were also present, along with other renowned figures from the great thousand worlds. It was clear that this grand wedding was a worldwide event, one that the entire world celebrated with joy. Spouses, bow to each other. At the command, Mu Chen, wearing a bright red robe, gazed at the girl in front of him, her head adorned with a phoenix crown. The two gently bent at the waist. As they raised their heads, their gazes met, and the corners of their lips lifted in unison, mirroring the first time they had locked eyes many years ago, back in the spirit road, among the trees, one high and one low, the boy and the girl sharing a glance. Years passed quietly and swiftly. In the blink of an eye, 27 years had gone by. In those 27 years, the great thousand worlds had grown even more prosperous, with countless superpowers emerging. At the same time, top-tier experts from the world continuously appeared, making the scene ever more vibrant. Yet, no matter how remarkable any individual became, it was known throughout the great thousand worlds that there were still three people who remained unrivaled. On the Tianluo continent, at the Mu Manor headquarters, on a quiet green peak, Mu Chen leaned lazily, gazing down at the spiritual energy river rushing below. At the end of the river stood an ancient stone gate, the Dragon Ascension Gate. Before the gate, many disciples of Mu Manor attempted to leap across, drawing many exclamations from the crowd. While Mu Chen casually watched this spectacle, a small figure stumbled toward him, then crashed into his arms. "Daddy," came the tender voice. Mu Chen hurriedly embraced the little one, a warm smile on his face. The one who had rushed into his arms was a little girl, appearing about 2 years old. She was incredibly beautiful, with red lips and white teeth, big eyes that were bright and clear, and her little body clad in a green dress, her hair styled in twin pigtails. She looked so lively and adorable that it nearly melted Mu Chen's heart. This was his and Luo Li's daughter, whom they had named Mu Yunxi many years ago. "Hey, little Yunxi, did you miss Daddy?" Mu Chen asked, holding her, smiling. "Yes," little Yunxi replied, and her small hands immediately reached toward the spiritual melons and fruits on the stone table beside them. Her eyes sparkled with desire as she looked at the glistening fruits, clearly more attracted to them than to her father. Little glutton, Chen couldn't help but laugh and tease. "It's only been a moment. What could you possibly miss?" came a teasing voice from behind. Luo Li, dressed in a black gown, walked over, her beautiful eyes showing a hint of helplessness as she glanced at the father and daughter being so affectionate. Since Yunqi was born, Chen's indulgence toward her had sometimes made Luo Li feel a bit jealous. Chen chuckled, extending his hand to take Luo Li's, pulling her to sit beside him. The family of three appeared content, the atmosphere warm and harmonious. Buzz. As Chen basked in the cozy atmosphere, his eyes suddenly narrowed. He sensed an unusual fluctuation in the surrounding world. Boom, boom. Soon after Chen's perception, the entire great thousand worlds shook, and the spiritual energy in the heavens and earth churned wildly. "What's happening?" Luo Li exclaimed, noticing the strange change. Chen stood up, his gaze fixed on the void. It was as though he could see through space to the source of the spiritual energy fluctuation. He smiled slightly and said, "The day has finally come." As his words fell, countless beings throughout the great thousand worlds felt a sudden tremor and looked up in shock. They saw a mysterious curtain of cloud descending from the heavens. It was the heavenly scroll. At that very moment, in the far-off boundless fire domain and martial realm, two towering figures stood in the air. With a flick of their hands, they sent billions of streams of spiritual light cascading down. As the light fell, two complete, true names slowly appeared on the heavenly scroll. Xiao, Lin Dong. On the green peak, Chen gently placed Yunqi down, then looked up toward the direction of the boundless fire domain and martial realm, cupping his hands in salute, his voice echoing as if it could pierce the heavens. Congratulations to the two seniors for ascending the heavenly scroll. In the distance, Emperor Yin and martial ancestors smiled and nodded in acknowledgement, returning the salute from afar. In the great thousand worlds, countless cheers erupted, and many powerful beings gazed with admiration and envy. They knew that, from this day forward, two more supreme beings would emerge in the great thousand worlds. Countless life forms bowed in the direction of the three individuals, paying their respects from afar. With three protectors in the great thousand worlds, prosperity would surely last for millions of years, never to fade.